As you look back over the year, can you say with me, God's plan was better than my plan? I don't know about you, but I think it's true. Remember, you have plans, but God has your purpose. This is so critical for us to get. And the reason it's so critical is we fight it. So do you have plans or do you have a purpose for 2023? From the time we were little, we were asked what our plans were. What do you want to be when you grow up? What are you going to major in college? What career path will you follow? Will you marry and have a family? How many of you have become what you wanted to be when you were a child? I was going to be a vet. And I was going to have a house that was like a mini zoo. It would have lions and tigers and bears and all sorts of other animals. It would have monkeys and all sorts of animals would all be living there. And I would care for them all as a good vet. I even had a graph paper drawn out with what rooms were going to be where and which ones would be cages. And they were going to live in my house. Have you seen my house looking like that yet? Me either. I have 2 dogs and that's about it. So have you become what you were going to be or what you thought you would do when you were a child? Are you working in the career field that you studied for in school? Have you had the family you thought you would have when you imagined your youth? I remember being about 9 or 10 years old and playing Life for the first time with one of my cousins. And I was just flabbergasted. We were supposed to choose, do you go to college or not? Do you have kids? Do you get married? What do you do? And I'm going, in a game? I don't know. What helps you most? See, I didn't even have good plans, but God had a purpose for my life. Trying to learn God's purpose in our lives is as elusive as the Loch Ness monster if we're trying to find it out on our own. But God has a pretty hefty head start to help us. David reminds us about that head start. He says in Psalm 139, your eyes saw my body even before it was formed. You planned how many days I would live. You wrote down the number of them in your book before I even lived through one of them. Yeah. That page that I drew out about where all the rooms were going to be, that was because that was my imagination. That was my plan. But God's purpose for my life was totally different. And how he led me through my life was totally different. God writes them down in the book, not so he can say, wasn't that a great idea? But because he wants to say to you with all of his heart, you are completing this that I had purposed for you before you were ever created. That's what the very next verse talks about. God, your thoughts about me are priceless, and no one can possibly add them up. God thought about you so long and so deeply that you can't even imagine his thoughts. If you thought that was far back, God loved you before the world was ever created. Ephesians 1:4 says, God chose us to belong to Christ before the world was created. He chose us to be holy and without blame in his eyes. He loved us. Now, I want you to think back on all the plans you've made in your life and how you got there. Hindsight often helps us remember that our decisions are short-sighted compared to God's plan for our lives. The wisest man to ever live, Solomon, was not considered wise because he was so great, but because he knew the blessings of God and what put him in that place. A choice happened before he was ever created in his mother's womb. The choices that were so far beyond his understanding or wisdom to choose so that he could fulfill the purpose God had for him before the world was created. He penned this verse with the inspiration of the Spirit. A person may have many plans in their heart, but the Lord's purpose wins out in the end. Now, if you need a reminder of that, that's in Proverbs 19:21. So here's my challenge for you this week. I want you to remember that proverb 19:21. A person may have many plans in their heart, but the Lord's purpose wins out in the end. And your challenge this week is to ask God to show you his purpose for your life and to give you the wisdom to live into that purpose over your own plans. We're about halfway through the first month of the year. How are you doing on following God's purpose for 2023? See you next time. God bless.